Hi everyone, my name is Belinda Reyes and I'm the Director of the GRADE program at Stockholm Resilience Centre. So we're all beginning to realise that the world we live in today, the Anthropocene, is very different from the world of 200 years ago or even 50 years ago. It not only looks different, it also works differently. And I'm not just talking about the biological or physical aspects such as climate and forest cover that are different, but socially, politically and economically, we're seeing new patterns emerge globally, such as rising and globalized inequalities and patterns of extreme and entrenched marginalization and poverty. But despite these realizations, we still insist on using a model of development that was invented in and for an earlier world. Acknowledging that we have changed the way the world works surely means that we have to change the way we think about our future development on it too. And this is what I want to explore in this chapter. How can we continue to develop in the Anthropocene? But before I get going, I think it's worth our while to dig into what we mean by continuing to develop. At a high level, we all generally agree that development is about improving the well-being of individuals and societies, and this is often referred to as economic development at a national scale. But then we also get global or international development as efforts by wealthy or northern countries to address human development needs in the global south in low-income countries. And then there's sustainable development, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising future development. It's clear there are many terms and definitions and ideologies, and development itself is a very laden, confusing, and much critiqued term. But getting into that confusion and critique is not the point here. Instead, it rather seems useful to recognize the new context we find ourselves in the Anthropocene, and to work towards building new models and visions of development more fit for this context. Over the past decades, the concept of resilience has become very popular as a possible way to rethink or redesign development for a more turbulent context. Resilience itself is a diverse and broad concept or approach. But the social ecological systems school of resilience, which will be my focus here, is one of the oldest and academically most influential schools of resilience. Specifically, its rich foundations in complexity science and the science of surprise, as well as its integrated perspective of humans and nature, appears to make it well suited to the context of the Anthropocene. It's, however, a huge body of work with theories and evidence drawn from many disciplines and many parts of the world, and it can make it quite daunting to try and distill out and translate what this means for practice and policy. So what I've done here is to look across this body of work and distill out an initial 3 high-level insights that appear to have particular relevance in our search for new models of development in the Anthropocene. These 3 high-level insights from resilience revolve around the scale or scales of development, the role of environment in development, and how we approach change or think about change in development. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to dig into each insight, explore some examples and what they mean for development, and what alternative approaches resilience might suggest for development. So the first insight is about scale, and many development projects tend to focus on the local scale, on households or communities. However, most resilience research highlights that while the problem may emerge at a local scale, drivers and causes mostly come from the global and regional and cut across scales, interacting with one another, landing at the local in often very surprising ways. If we take, for example, water security in rapidly urbanizing areas, like Cape Town, where I'm sitting at the moment in the midst of a severe water crisis, the focus here is often very at the local scale, in the city on securing the local provision of water, and sometimes at the global scale on the policy environments of climate change. But actually, if you look into the research, one realizes that it's not just local or global. It's about the movement of surface and groundwater, of rain, and even evaporation from often very far distant places, which links local water provision to regional watersheds and transboundary and even intercontinental dependencies. In fact, research has shown that more than half of megacities worldwide are substantially reliant on land far away for their rainfall, especially during dry years. But we all know it's not just about rainfall. It's also the complex interplay of the cross-scale drivers of demand, and these are linked to patterns of urbanization, economic migration, tourism and agricultural policies, and infrastructure investments. Resilience research is useful in highlighting the risks of ignoring these cross-scale forces, not only because they're key to securing water now, but often focusing only on the local scale in the short term may actually undermine the city's resilience and ability to cope with the next drought. Resilience also usefully offers new approaches to water security, like watershed or even precipitation shed management, innovations in water use and water use efficiency, and behavioral changes linked to the shifts in demands required. So ensuring cities have water in their taps, or for that matter, nutritious food, healthy citizens, or clean air, is clearly an endeavour that bridges and cuts across the local, the regional, the national, and global scales. The second insight is on the role of environment. Historically, the focus of development has seldom been on environment, often seeing it as irrelevant or an external unnecessary cost, or perhaps proposing that environment can be looked after development goals have been met. But more recently, we've seen a shift in development and the acknowledgement of environmental limits to development, for example, climate change, species loss, and pollution. And even further, we've seen moves to recognize the role of environment in providing services to development, like coastal protection from storms, pollination of food crops, or watershed protection for urban water security. Resilience recognizes the importance of these flows between ecosystems, societies, and economies, but it moves further to emphasize the embedded nature of society within ecosystems and the long history and future of societies and ecosystems shaping and being shaped by one another. Let's look at food as an example, and the dominant view in development for food security is about maximizing the flow of calories from soil to mouth. Research, however, shows that food security is more than just food production and access. It's a co-evolved interplay of human preferences, diversity of food sources, strong social cultural ties to landscape and food varieties, food prices, and global economic dynamics. Arguably, the global food system and the growing food retail system don't account for this deeply embedded nature of food, cultures, and ecosystems, as they are shifting to more large-scale homogenization of production, retail, and consumption of food. And this could offer a partial explanation of the new emerging food security challenges we see in the Anthropocene, linked to malnutrition and obesity. Similar to the scale example, resilience research highlights the risks of ignoring the embedded nature of ecosystems and societies in current food production efforts, both through their ability to undermine short-term as well as long-term well-being and sustainability. But usefully, it offers insights into alternative approaches in this space, including land uses such as agroecology, food justice movements, new governance arrangements needed to match the complexity of the issue, as well as highlighting some of the changes possible within the global food and retail system. There are, of course, challenges ahead that lie in understanding what a more embedded approach to food would look like at a global scale, especially considering rapid urbanization and a more widely dispersed food system. But although the connections between people and environment may become more distant and harder to see, it doesn't mean that they're not there. This strong coupling between ecosystems and societies is true also for many other aspects of well-being, including mental and physical health, social relations, and education. For the final insight, we get to look into what resilience really means when it comes to dealing with change. For many, resilience has meant bouncing back or persisting through change, and this is often the meaning in areas such as disaster resilience, where it's often about withstanding change so that people and communities can continue to develop as they had been before the disaster. However, if one takes into consideration the amount of change contained within the Anthropocene, its scale, speed, and unpredictability, then it becomes clear that withstanding change is going to get harder and harder. Instead, resilience research makes it clear that we will have to stop withstanding change and start adapting to change as a means of being resilient. This is very popular in areas such as climate resilience, where the idea is about adapting livelihoods and development opportunities to better suit the new context, for example, through drought-resistant crops allowing farmers to adapt to a warmer and dry environment. But essentially, the system stays on the same development path of farming. There is a third dimension of resilience which is becoming critically important in the context of development in the Anthropocene, and that's the idea of transformation. Transformations can be seen as reformulations or reconfigurations of systems linked to things like radical shifts in ecosystems, values and beliefs, patterns of social behavior, and management regimes. There are many examples of transformations in history, including things like the shift from forested landscapes to agricultural systems, the Industrial Revolution and its transformations of societies and economies, and the political transformation here in South Africa from apartheid to democracy. Resilience research highlights that there are many places or systems in the world, including areas of persistent poverty or protracted crises, which would benefit more from transformations of the large-scale structures creating these conditions. Here, resilience offers new models for development that explore alternative system states, the necessary reconfigurations, interventions, and capacities needed to get there. So across all of these insights, resilience research is useful in highlighting the risks of not considering the cross-scale dynamics, our embedded nature in the environment, and the need for more radical transformations in development. And in fact, it challenges current ways of funding, designing, and managing development projects. Resilience approaches do not fit well into many mainstream development approaches and their reliance on current best practices, toolkits, and indicators. Fitting resilience into these types of approaches diminishes its potential to transform development. But instead, resilience offers new models and pathways for development that is cross-scale, embedded, and transformative. Importantly, offers proactive approaches for a turbulent development context, so that instead of being surprised by surprise, we're planning and preparing for change, both expected and unexpected. And with these initial insights and the many more to follow from resilience research and other areas of science and practice, we find new ways of understanding our new world, how it's changing, and how to act amidst all this change so that we can continue to develop. I look forward to exploring these insights in more detail with you as we move forward. Thank you.